chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi sueldo.
Ahora no me pagan ese güey mi
Y
sueldo.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga.
Abusado jornalero, porque ese güey no paga. Puros cheques de hule que rebotan. Point, point, point. Alto, cara de yo no fui, patilla larga, bigote caído, ceja poblada. No le haga confianza, no le haga confianza.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me fui a chambear ahí en el Home Depot.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Me subí a la troca de un patrón canijo.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Tarde me di cuenta que era un vil ratero.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi sueldo.
Ahora no me paga ese güey mi
Y
sueldo.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga.
Ese güey no paga.
Y abusado, anote la placa, tómele foto, anote la dirección. Negocie bien antes de subirse a cualquier carro o troca. Dígale que hoy no se fía, mañana sí. Día pagado, día trabajado, jejepa. Cuídate jornalera, cuídate jornalero. Que no te trancen, que no te trancen, jejepa.
Kita boleh dapat pilih apa?
Y por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
por eso les canto y por eso les digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
si sale su esposa también le digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
salieron sus hijos y yo
Ay,
le
video lebih
digo.
tu tahu tak?
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
salió su vecino y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga.
Llegó la reportera y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga.
Llegó la policía y yo le digo.
Ese güey no
Llegó
paga.
el periodista y yo le digo.
Ese güey no
Y
paga.
salió su Sancho y yo le digo.
Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. Ese güey no paga. No paga ese güey.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. Just a quick note before we start, this event requires everyone to enable simultaneous interpretation. So to do so, please click the small black and white globe titled Interpretation at the bottom of your screen. After that, select the language that you would like to hear. Today we have English, Spanish, Russian, Chinese, and Burmese. This will allow you to hear simultaneous interpretation in your preferred language throughout the event. Please note our Burmese interpretation with Mrs. Ma Mo is sequential, not simultaneous. So please stay in your room and your preferred language will follow shortly after she speaks. All other interpretation during the event will be simultaneous. Thank you.
And just to say that in Spanish for anyone who has not logged into that channel, Hola, buenos días a todos y todas. Si usted necesita interpretación a español, por favor, vaya abajo al globito que tiene en blanco y negro, dice interpretación, y haga clic, selecciona idioma Spanish o español. Si usted está en su teléfono, presiona los dos puntos y selecciona donde dice interpretación de idioma y selecciona español. Va a escuchar en Burmese, en Chinese y en ruso. Entonces, si no habla todos los 5 idiomas, por favor, selecciona su idioma preferido de español.
Hello, everyone. Just to give you the Russian version of that. Здравствуйте, дорогие друзья. Чтобы услышать презентацию на русском языке, пожалуйста, увидите в нижней части экрана небольшой белый черный глобус. Выберите этот глобус. Там увидите разные языковые каналы. Выберите русский язык. Выключите оригинальный аудио. И потом нажмите на «Готово». И вы потом услышите всю презентацию на русском языке. Перевод будет синхронный, кроме бюрмского языка. Это будет последовательный перевод. Спасибо.
So for Chinese translation, 大家好，欢迎大家参与这次活动。在这次活动之中，我们将会提供全程的中文同声翻译。如果你需要中文翻译的话，请选择现在 Zoom 窗口下面黑白色的小地球标识的翻译按钮，然后选择中文。那么如果选择中文的话，在整个活动过程之中，你只需要待在这个中文频道即可。我们会有提供全程的同声翻译。再次感谢您的参与。
Thank you. Hopefully everyone is now in their channel and able to hear across 5 languages. On behalf of the Global Labor Justice International Labor Rights Forum board, staff, and partners, I want to welcome everyone here for this important roundtable discussion. For us, this annual event is a moment to highlight labor rights defenders who are on the front lines demanding corporate, investor, and state accountability for workers in the global economy. In 2021, in the second year of the pandemic, our reliance on global supply chains and global labor migration corridors for our food, consumer goods, and services is clearer than it has ever been before. In fact, the New York Times has now labeled the COVID-19 pandemic the great supply chain disruption. And almost daily, there are newspaper articles with titles like Supply Chain Shortages, Your Questions Answered, or Markets Work but Untangling Global Supply Chains, and most recently, How Supply Chains Will Affect Your Christmas Holidays. This focus leaves out much of the reality of what may be more accurately called transnational global production networks. It erases the workers who create components, assemble them, and move them around the network and across borders. And it obscures how the structure of the business model itself creates extreme downward pressure on wages and working conditions. A spectrum of abuse from wage theft to forced labor is not a surprise. It should be expected. And today, the labor leaders on our roundtable will discuss how they are responding to these structural pressures through organizing, union building, and transnational bargaining models, along with where more research, analysis, and regulation is needed. While data is hard to pin down, the International Labor Organization estimates that in 2016, 24.9 million people were subjected to forced labor, with women and girls accounting for 60%. The private sector's use of forced labor generated more than $150 billion that year in illegal profits. And moreover, these business models are configured to profit from women's unequal position within industries and societies more broadly. Women workers in many sectors experience lower wages, less stable employment, and barriers to access to justice and remedy. Gender norms in work and the division of labor which channel women into or exclude them from specific jobs, also has the impact of restricting women to hidden and uncompensated tasks. And at their base level, global supply chains often rely on casualized, informal, and non-waged forms of labor to which households make gendered contributions. Our roundtable today will feature US Deputy Secretary Julie Su, along with 4 women labor leaders who will share their experience on how they've organized workers into unions in sectors that have been historically relied on forced labor, along with their vision for a more just and equitable global economy. I will make brief introductions now, and you may also find additional information about our panelists in the written program. Deputy Secretary Julie Su was appointed by President Biden and confirmed by the Senate in July of this year. Prior to joining the US Department of Labor, Deputy Secretary Su served as the Secretary for the California Labor and Workforce Development Agency. Before that, Deputy Secretary Su was the litigation director at Asian Americans Advancing Justice, Los Angeles, where she led groundbreaking litigation with multiracial organizing, community education, and coalition work, including the El Monte case on behalf of Thai workers subjected to forced labor in garment sweatshops in Los Angeles. Mamo Sanda Mien is a union organizer and former garment worker who currently serves as the chairwoman of the Federation of Garment Workers Myanmar. In the context of ongoing state harassment and arrest of trade unionists, she has led more than 20 pro-democracy protests since the military takeover of Myanmar in February 1st, 2021, including during the February 22nd general strike. Allison Lee is a co-founder and the Secretary General of the Yilan Migrant Fishermen Union, which is Taiwan's first labor union composed of and led by foreign migrant workers. She has experience in government and NGO positions and is recognized for raising national and international attention and demanding accountability for forced labor and exploitative conditions for mostly migrant fishing crews. Rosa Agaidarova led the formation of the first democratic union in Uzbekistan's history in March earlier this year. After facing retaliation as a whistleblower herself, she organized workers at the Indorama, which is a cotton plantation and spinning company with investments from the World Bank Group. Today, the union, Adalat Tsari Olga, has tripled its membership and is negotiating for better contracts and better conditions for farm workers. And Iris Munguia is the Secretary of Women for the Honduran Union Federation, Festagro. She is also the former coordinator of COSIBA, the coordinating body of Latin American banana and agro-industrial unions, a coalition of unions representing 55,000 workers across 8 countries and the largest transnational federation of private sector unions in the Americas. She's been a leader for decades in the sector and region in demanding an end to gender-based violence and harassment against the opposition of multinational employers who claimed it was just part of the culture. We welcome you all, and we are deeply appreciative and honored of your participation today. And I'll begin with the first question to Deputy Secretary Su. As we move through this roundtable, we're going to hear from Mamo, Allison, Rosa, and Iris on what drove them to build unions and their vision as women labor leaders. What can you share with us about the Biden administration's commitment to promoting freedom of association, the right to collective bargaining, and gender equity and equality for workers outside US borders? And what role will the US Department of Labor play?
Okay, Amia.
JJ, thank you so much. And I just want to tell you how thrilled I am to be here, especially with you to support your leadership. I've seen you do amazing things from the time you started as a Skadden Fellow advocating for workers in the Gulf Coast. And it's a privilege to be here with all of you. And I really look forward to hearing what all these amazing women labor leaders have to say today. I'll just pick up from what you said about the supply chain issues. All of this attention now to the supply chain really drives home what those of us who have been doing this work for a long time have always known, which is obviously one, that the workers around the world are connected and our well-being is interconnected. But two, that the global race to the bottom, where corporations have been permitted to seek out the cheapest labor wherever they can find it and exert further downward pressure on wages and working conditions, has created an unsustainable problem. And now that we have a global health crisis, we are seeing just how problematic that is. We see that these are problems of working conditions in the supply chain from the beginning, from manufacturing to what we're seeing now in the articles JJ mentioned at the ports. They are related to companies who have contracted and subcontracted and misclassified employees along their supply chain, which includes for truck drivers and warehouse workers. And we now, in light of this, have a chance to say that's enough. We need to do something differently, and we need to respect and protect workers both in the US and around the globe. And at the end of the day, the supply chain issue is not a labor shortage problem, it's a job quality shortage problem. So we have a chance to really look at job quality and what that means. And of course, as President Biden says all the time, as does the US Secretary of Labor, Marty Walsh, unions are a key part of the definition of what makes a good job a good job. Throughout the pandemic, we've also seen that union workers lost their job at lower rates, even in industries that were devastated by the pandemic, right? Even in industries like hospitality, much of which shut down almost overnight, union employers found a way to work with their employees to shift. We saw big hotels, for example, in Los Angeles, union hotels that switched from their regular work to taking these industrial sized kitchen and starting to create food for delivery. And so those are the kinds of things that unions allow. We've also seen in the recovery that union employers are not having the same problem that non-union employers are having in terms of bringing workers back, which again goes to it's not a labor shortage per se, it's a job quality shortage problem. There was recently some attention to that in the UPS experience versus FedEx. So in terms of what this means globally, the president really sees our commitment to unionization and his very intentional and deliberate embrace of unions as key to the kind of equitable economy we need to have in America and around the world, as supporting unionization efforts in the US and supporting the right to collectively bargain and join unions in other parts of the world as well. And worker voice and advancing gender and racial justice are also absolutely key to the president's vision. This is both because we understand that the well-being of workers, again, in other parts of the world affects the well-being of US workers, and because it's just a matter of basic fairness and justice. Workers have to have the right to work collectively to improve working conditions, wages, and their own health and dignity in the workplace. So I'm going to mention a few specific things in terms of the Biden administration's policies. So our worker-centered trade policy has, for the first time, placed workers at the heart of U.S. trade policy, which means weighing the actions we take based on how they affect workers and their families. And the Department of Labor plays a crucial role in enforcing the labor protections, the labor provisions of trade agreements. Our ILAB, which is our Bureau of International Labor Affairs, we are adding significant resources to this international bureau and building cases and monitoring compliance with trade provisions. Much of our focus has been in Mexico and enforcing the strong new labor provisions of the USMCA. including the rapid response mechanism that enables us to focus on violations of trade union rights at the company level. We've already seen this, for example, in the General Motors workers, right? The General Motors plant in Silao, how powerful this tool can be, where workers have actually, they rejected an existing collective bargaining agreement. And we've been working with them along with Mexico's Ministry of Labor and ILO observers to make sure that workers get to truly choose an organization of their own choice. And this has been a win for labor protections that are built into that US, Mexico, and Canada agreement. The other thing that we have coming up is a democracy summit. And this is something that the president is going to host, a summit for democracy, a virtual summit December 9th through 10th. And leading up to that, the department is going to be hosting a series of events on the vital role of worker organizations in vibrant democracies. So part of the goal of the summit is to raise the importance of worker organizing as fundamental to high functioning, effective democracies. And so we will also be announcing, furthering our initiatives to strengthen the capacity of democratic trade unions around the world. And so that's something else that our Department of Labor is going to be doing with International Trade Union Confederation and the AFL-CIO. And we will be holding 4 international and 1 domestic listening session with workers and worker organizations to inform this high-level event and the development of our initiative. And I guess the last thing I'll just say is, as the president has said often and has been so exposed to the pandemic, right, the gender and racial inequities in our economy, in our society, simply cannot stand. And so we are committing through the Gender Policy Council to looking at and advancing wage justice and worker justice for women workers around the world. And there is an Equal Pay International Coalition, or EPIC. It's the only multi-stakeholder partnership working to reduce the gender pay gap at the global, regional, and national levels. It's led by the International Labor Organization, UN Women, and the OECD, and has membership from governments and worker organizations and employers. And its goal is to really achieve equal pay for women by bringing together a range of partners to make concrete and coordinated progress toward equal pay. So all of those are priorities here at the department, and we're going to continue to strengthen our work. And again, look forward to hearing and learning from those of you all here. Buenos dias, 大家好, sawadee ka. It's definitely, just even in the language capabilities here, a demonstration of our commitment to real inclusion and equity that we share with JJU and your organization, the great work that you do.
Thank you so much. I now want to pass to Mamo. We want to hear more from you about how you built the union, what inspired you to do that, and how were you able to succeed?
Okay, ကျမ မမိုးဆန္ဒမြင့်ပါကျမကအထက်ကျုပ်လုပ်သမားဟောင်းတယောက်ဖြစ်တယ်လို့လက်ရှိမြန်မာနိုင်ငံအထွေထွေလုပ်သမားသမဂ္ဂများအဖွဲ့ချုပ် FGWI ရဲ့ဥက္ကဋ္ဌတယောက်လည်းဖြစ်ပါတယ်ပေါ့နော်ကျမဆိုလို့ရှိရင်1999ခု2000ခုနှစ်ကစပြီးတော့အထက်ကျုပ်စက်ရုံမှာအလုပ်စတင်ပြီးတော့ဝင်ရောက်လုပ်ကင်ခဲ့ပါတယ်2015ခုနှစ်မှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်ဒါပထမဦးဆုံးအကြိမ်ပေါ့နော်အနေဆုံးလောက်ခလာစာကိုကျမတို့မြန်မာနိုင်ငံမှာတတ်မှတ်ပြဋ္ဌာန်းခဲ့တယ်ပဲเนาะအဲ့ဒီအချိန်မှာကျမအလုပ်လုပ်နေတဲ့ဒီထိပ်တန်းမြန်မာအထည်ချုပ်စက်ရုံမှာရှိတဲ့လုပ်ငန်းရှင်ကနေပြီးတော့အလုပ်သမားတွေကိုအ ਨੇ ဆုံးလုပ်အားကကိုဥပဒေနဲ့အညီမပေးချေခဲ့ပါဘူးဒါကြောင့်ကျမအနေနဲ့အလုပ်သမား220ကိုကိုစားပြုဥဆောင်ပြီး2လအကြာတပိတ်မောက်စုပေါင်းတောင်းဆိုတိုက်ပွဲဝင်ခဲ့ရပြီးအောင်မြင်မှုလည်းရရှိခဲ့တယ်ပေါ့နော်2015ခုနှစ်နောက်ပိုင်းမှာဆိုရင်အ ਨੇ ဆုံးလောက်ခလာစာတတ်မှတ်ပြဋ္ဌာန်းပြီးတဲ့နောက်မှာအလုပ်သမားအခွင့်အရေးချိုးဖောက်မှုတွေများစွာရှိလာတဲ့ဥပဒေဆိုင်ရာအကျိုးစီးပွားဆိုင်ရာချိုးဖောက်မှုတွေကိုမြန်မာပြည်အနှံ့မှာရှိတဲ့အလုပ်သမားတွေများစွာကြုံတွေ့ခံစားလာရတာတွေကြောင့်ဒီစုပေါင်းတောင်းဆိုမှုတွေတပိတ်မောက်တိုက်ပွဲတွေနဲ့မမျှတမှုတွေကိုရင်ဆိုင်တိုက်ပွဲဝင်ခဲ့ကြရတယ်ပေါ့နော်အလုပ်သမားတွေအနေနဲ့မိမိတို့ရဲ့အခွင့်အရေးကိုမိမိတို့ကိုယ်တိုင်တောင်းဆိုရမယ်ဆိုတာကိုကျမတို့အနေနဲ့မတူညီသောပုံစံမျိုးစုံနဲ့စီယုံပြောဆိုပေးခဲ့တာတွေလှုပ်ဆောင်ခဲ့တယ်ပေါ့နော်
Just a reminder to everyone that this
Right.
interpretation is sequential. So you have heard Momo in Burmese and now you will hear the English. The rest of the panelists will have simultaneous translation. So, okay, thank you and we welcome.
So my name is Musa Namie. I am a former garment factory worker and the current president of the Federation of General Workers Myanmar. It is formerly known as Federation of Garment Workers Myanmar. I started working at a garment factory since 1990-2000. And in 2015, the very first minimum wage was set in Myanmar. At the time, the owner of Taedan Myanmar Garment Factory, where I work, did not pay the workers the legal minimum wage. Thus, I, representing the 220 workers, led a strike and demanded for legal minimum wage. The strike lasted for 2 months, and finally, we won our demand. After the legal minimum wage was set in 2015, many labor rights violations broke out. As workers across the country faced legal labor rights violations, they began fighting against the injustices through staging strikes and collective bargaining. We mobilized and organized the worker by telling them that we ourselves fight for our rights. She will continue the translation. No? She will continue.
ဟုတ်ကဲ့ကျေးဇူးပါဒီမတရားမှုတွေကိုသိရှိသွားတဲ့ဒါအလုတ်သမားတွေကဆိုလို့ရှိရင်မတရားမှုတွေကိုလက်မခံတော့ဘဲနဲ့အလုတ်သမားတွေအချင်းချင်းစီယုံနဲ့ခေါင်းဆောင်တွေကိုရွေးချယ်ကြတယ်ပြီးတော့ကိုယ့်အခွင့်အရေးအတွက်ကိုယ်တိုင်တိုက်ပွဲဝင်ရမှနေပြီးတော့အလုတ်သမားတပိတ်တွေဒါများစွာဖြစ်ပေါ်လာကြတယ်ပြီးလို့ရှိရင်တမကတွေဖွဲ့စည်းလာခဲ့တယ်ပေါ့နော်အလုတ်သမားတပိတ်မမှုတွေနဲ့တမကတွေဖွဲ့စည်းတဲ့အချိန်မှာအလုတ်သမားခေါင်းဆောင်များကမတရားသဖြင့်အလုတ်ထုတ်ခံရမှုတွေကြုံခဲ့ရတယ်မတရားသဖြင့်တရားစွဲဆိုမှုတွေလည်းဒါကြုံခဲ့ရတယ်ပေါ့နော်ကျမတို့မြန်မာပြည်မှာရှိတဲ့တမကတွေကဆိုလို့ရှိရင်စုပေါင်းတောင်းဆိုမှုဒါတပိတ်တိုက်ပွဲတွေကမှတဆင့်ပေါ်ပေါက်လာကြတာဖြစ်တယ်ကျမတို့အဖွဲ့ချုပ်ကဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လည်းတပိတ်တိုက်ပွဲပေါင်းများစွာမှတဆင့်ဒီမိုကရေစီနီးကျရွေးချယ်ထားသောတမကများနဲ့ဖွဲ့စည်းထားပြီးတော့အလုသမားများစွာ၏အခွင့်အရေးဆိုင်ရာအကျိုးစီးပွားဆိုင်ရာတွေကိုကူညီပေးနိုင်ပြီးတော့အောင်မြင်တဲ့အဖွဲ့ချုပ်တစ်ခုဖြစ်လာခဲ့တယ်ပေါ့နော်
The workers who become aware of the injustices are not docile anymore, and they organize among themselves, select the workers' leaders themselves, and began fighting for their rights. This brought about many labor strikes and labor unions. During that period, union leaders have also faced unfair dismissals and lawsuits by their employers. Most of the unions in Myanmar are born out of strikes. FGWM is one of them. Our federation is born out of many labor strikes and comprised of democratically elected unions. It also becomes a successful federation that can now protect the rights of the worker. I think that is all the response.
Thank you, Momo. I'd now like to pass to Allison Lee to hear more about building the union in the migrant fishing sector.
Yes. To me, everyone should be treated equally. So I believe that, regardless of their race, their occupation, and class, they should be treated equally. We shouldn't treat them differently. To me, I'm a Christian. I remember that in the Bible, it says that if you do some service work, you are actually like sitting in the smallest, smallest among you, which is sitting on God. So I think with the perspective that I have, I try to do my best to serve these workers, to fight for their rights. I also believe that, among these workers, they should have a certain dignity. They should be treated equally. Be it their wage or their overtime pay or their working period or their resting period, or if they live on shore or live on boat, all these conditions need to be set. And it should be a very fair and a dignified situation. So that's why I want to, further advocate for them and do these fights for them. And I think to me, assisting them to to establish the union, I don't see as a job. I don't see as a work. I don't do it just because I want the money. No, actually, in these 7 years I work in this union, I've never get paid. I've never get paid for a day. So I'm fighting their rights for them. But when I'm doing so, I don't, rely on CEO whether or not I get the wage and whether or not I do this. I'm not doing this for money. And I'm very happy that if one day they can fight for themselves and they can, have the union themselves, then I can retire. So I think that's it for my sharing for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Now we'll pass to Rosa. The Cotton Campaign has been a very important part of ILRF's history and many of the people I know on this call. So we're very excited to welcome you here, Rosa, and hear about your experience.
Greetings, everyone. Again, this is my first time participating in an event like this, so I'm very, very nervous. It's a great honor for me to speak together with such brave, wonderful women. I hope you're going to like my story. I live in Uzbekistan, and in 2016, I got a job at Indorama, at transnational company. I worked at the Human Resources Department. At the time, I thought, well, it's an international brand. It's a great company. And I thought working at HR would be very interesting, and they would be doing everything the proper way. But unfortunately, they were not. And I understood it very quickly that they were doing a lot of illegal things. Like, for example, hiring workers using contracts that deprive those workers of any social benefits or guarantees, like holidays or sick days. And when I realized that, I went from working at HR to their accounting department, but I saw corruption there as well. And when I started informing the management about it, they decided to just dismiss me illegally. But I sued them, and I was able to win reinstatement. And when it happened, it gave me and it gave other people who have also suffered from the actions of this company to move forward. So we joined our forces, and we decided for the first time in the history of Uzbekistan to organize this union. And it's the first time that it happened in Uzbekistan. And I remember our first spontaneous meetings, and it was open air. It was in February, snow, rain. But despite all of this, over 300 people got together, and that was our first meeting. And right now, our union have been able to stop layoffs, illegal dismissals, and we're now negotiating to get rid of so-called seasonal contracts that do not have any guarantees for the workers. That's our main task. Thank you. That's all for now.
Thank you so much, Rosa. I want to pass now to Iris. Iris, you have many decades in this work, building such a Kolsiba, such a powerful network of supporting women workers in agriculture in Central America. So please please share with us your wisdom from all of these efforts.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much. It's to me a great pleasure to share with all of you, these fighters, female fighters, we have something in common. We are women, we are union people, and we work for improving the working conditions of female and male workers. The words of our of the deputy secretary are very encouraging when she says about strengthening the economy and the gender-based policy. That's very important because women are taking the worst part. Like you said, here in Honduras, it has been very, very bad. The levels of gender-based violence against women at this moment are terrible. But in short, I come from the banana sector. I worked for 20 years in a packing plant for a company, a small company, 22 years. And when I started there, there was a female and a joint organization, female and male organization, an old organization with a long fight with female and male workers, with about 40,000 workers there in terrible conditions, and they started a strike for a union. When I started, the union already existed, but it was joined. It was when I started in the 70s, it was male and female workers, and mostly men. And when here in Honduras, there is a probation period of 60 days, according to the law. When I completed my probation period, I joined the union. I started doing a union work with no experience, just very young and inexperienced. But ever since I started working, I was invited to the union meetings, and I accepted the invitations, and I went there at night with some co-workers, and I started liking the union work. But something that was more motivating for me was the fight for the conditions of women, how women are in labor situation, how women are in unions too. What is our involvement and participation, our share in unions? And that's how we started like making a diagnosis of our condition as women. And then we started a whole fight, educating ourselves, and then educating the female committee, the women's committee. We started in different plants, packing plants with 10 or 15 women, and we started working with them, educating them, and that's how we built a union net. And with this union net of women, we could talk about women, about that women have also the right to participate inside the power structure of the union. And a very nice experience for me was when we as a women got to the board, the board of the union, and also the medium, the direction. No woman have been ever been there, and that was a wonderful experience for us. And also something very nice thing that we experience as women, because women do a lot of things inside the union organizations and everywhere. And sometimes those things are not told, are not said, are not written. So it's like women don't do anything. So we have had the strength to write, and we now have 3 books of banana women, female workers. We wrote it as a competition contest of women in Central America, women from our own words and experience, because we are not writers. We just told of our social life, our union life, our labor life, and dreams, challenges, and hopes. That's the title of our book. And there is another book written by a researcher from California called The Union Female Power. It tells all our strategy of work, because in this work in Honduras, we could bring it all to Latin American level in our coalition of Latin American Union. And there is a nice experience I had the opportunity to experience. I've educated women for 12 years. Then I was this deputy coordinator, and then the coordinator. This is an experience that women can open spaces, because we always have the worst part, but it's also a very nice experience. And that we, by doing the work at all level of Latin America, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, and Central America, we also have a women's network of union female. I know we don't have too much time to share all this experience, but I would keep these 3 very positive experience. It doesn't mean that we don't have serious labor problems, but I wanted to share this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Iris. I hope this will be the beginning of many more conversations, and there is much to learn from the banana worker women of Central America about the stages of building a union, building the federation, building transnationally. So we really honor and appreciate your leadership in all of those things, and we're all standing on the foundation of that work in many ways. Deputy Secretary Sue, I'd like to come back and ask you a little bit more from your broad experience, how you see the importance of working women's leadership in efforts for decent work, and how you connect efforts to end forced labor with broader efforts to end gender-based violence and harassment, including more recently the ILO's Convention C-190 to eliminate gender-based violence and harassment at work.
Well, thank you so much for that, JJ. I'll just build right on La compañera Iris's comments about why it is important to acknowledge and celebrate victory. What everybody is saying is proving that when we organize, we win, and when we listen to women, the world becomes better. And so this ILO convention is actually the first international treaty to recognize the right of everyone in to a world of work that's free from violence and harassment, including gender-based violence and harassment. It seems so basic, but unfortunately, from the experiences that we're all talking about, it's not something that we can take for granted that women can enjoy. So the case that you mentioned, JJ, that I was so privileged to be a part of, involved 72 garment workers from Thailand. And just as Iris has said, and everyone has made this comment, you know, it was no accident that 67 of those 72 were women. And that's because women the world over are charged with the responsibility of caring for themselves, their families, their communities, without having the good job opportunities and other opportunities like education and to do so, right? So their vulnerabilities are really compounded by the inequitable burdens that women face in the world. And these women were trafficked to the United States. They were forced to work behind barbed wire and under armed guard in California, where they sewed garments for as long as 7 years. So Mamo, everything you said about the garment industry, about how basic labor standards are not respected, and about what you did through a strike is just, it feels very personal to me. And I know the risks that workers had to take to do that. Same way, Rosa, you mentioned, right, you were dismissed from your job for standing up for your rights. So there are very real risks that workers have to face. What we did in that case was I was a very young lawyer at the time who represented the workers with a coalition of other lawyers to file a lawsuit against not just the captors of the workers, but the companies that they were sewing for, the manufacturers and the retailers who were making a demand for their labor. And we said, it doesn't matter that you didn't hire the workers directly. You should still be responsible for your supply chain. And it was a really groundbreaking federal lawsuit. Everyone, the companies from the very beginning assumed that if they offered just a little bit of money, the workers would walk away with it, right? Because of course they're poor people and they're women. They will take whatever we give them. And the workers showed over years of a lawsuit and a campaign for corporate accountability that they were not going to walk away for pennies. They were not going to walk away for less than justice. So we were able to settle that case for millions of dollars, even though at the beginning people said we wouldn't get anything. But as we all know here, the true measure of victory is not really measured just in dollars, right? It's measured in workers feeling their own power. And in that case, we had the garment workers from Thailand who were trafficked to the United States. We also had Latino workers working at a front factory for this factory. And again, people thought you're not going to be able to bring Asian and Latino workers together, especially here in the United States, where there's so much conflict that gets created along racial lines between working people. But we did bring them together and they fought side by side for this multi-million-dollar victory that ended up changing the law. And so we're really proud of the changes that were made in that case. I think that the theories in the case, the recognizing worker power, the importance of women leadership that everyone has talked about were really in that case. And that really inspired me from very early in my career to continue to fight for workers. And so when I came into government, first in California at the state level, and now working for President Biden and Secretary Walsh in the Department of Labor, I promised myself and the workers I knew that I would make sure that their voices were always heard in the halls of power. And so what I learned, government, you'll often hear government say, well, we can't do these things because workers are too afraid. But what I've learned from a lifetime of working alongside low-wage workers who everybody expects to just keep their heads down and know their place is that it's not their fear that holds us back. It's the fear of those in power to really step up and support and join the campaigns and do what's right. And so I'm very, very, I take that responsibility of being in this position now very seriously, and in an administration that has been very clear that we have to recenter our economy, focus on real equity and justice, and build back better, which means building back with worker well-being at the heart of everything we do.
Thank you so much, Deputy Secretary Sue, and we're very lucky to have someone with your experience as part of a very strong team leading the Department of Labor at this critical time. Mamo, we'd like to turn to you to talk more about what does the union want to achieve? What is your vision for a more just future in Myanmar in this moment?
Yeah, we last okay. မြန်မာနိုင်ငံမှာပေါ့နော်ကျွန်တော်တို့မြန်မာပြည်မှာရှိတဲ့အထည်ချုပ်ကဏ္ဍတွေမှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်လုပ်သားအင်အားရဲ့90%ကဆိုရင်အမျိုးသမီးတွေဖြစ်တယ်ပေါ့နော်ဒါကြောင့်ကျွန်မအနေနဲ့ကအမျိုးသမီးအထည်ချုပ်လုပ်သမားတစ်ယောက်ဖြစ်ချင်းရဲ့အမျိုးသမီးကောင်းဆောင်ဖြစ်ချင်းရဲ့ကလုပ်သမားတွေရဲ့အခွင့်အရေး တောင်းဆိုတပိတ်မှောက်ရန်အတွက်ဖြစ်စေတပတ်ကဖွဲ့စည်းရန်အတွက်ဖြစ်စေပေါ့နော်စီယုံတဲ့နေရာမှာအများစွာဒါအထောက်အကူပြုတယ်ပေါ့နော်တမကတွေပေါ်ပေါက်လာခြင်းအပြင်လုံသမားတွေအနေနဲ့ဥပဒေပါအခွင့်အရေးတွေကိုအပြည့်အဝခံစားခွင့်တွေရှိလာပြီးတော့လုံအားနဲ့ညီမျှတဲ့အကျိုးစီးပွားဆိုင်ရာတွေတောင်းဆိုခွင့်ရှိလာကြတယ်ပေါ့နော်အခွင့်အရေးဆိုင်ရာတွေအကျိုးစီးပွားဆိုင်ရာတွေချိုးဖောက်မှုတွေရှိလာရင်လည်းအချိန်နဲ့တပြေးညီညှိနှိုင်းတောင်းဆိုမှုတွေပြုလုပ်လာနိုင်ခဲ့တယ်ပေါ့နော်
So in garment sector in Myanmar, 90% of the workforce is comprised of the female garment workers. And being a female garment worker myself and being a female leader helped me in both mobilizing the worker to go on strike for labor rights and also organizing the worker to form the union. And actually forming the unions enable the workers to be able to enjoy legal labor rights fully and to demand for other workplace benefits that are fair for the labor we put in. Moreover, the workers can effectively negotiate and resolve in face of the violation of labor rights. She will continue.
ဟုတ်ပြီဒီ2019ခုနှစ်မှာဆိုလို့ရှိရင်တော့ဒီအခြေခံတမကတွေကိုစုစည်းပြီးတော့ပြည်ထောင်စုအဆင့်ပေါ့နော် FGWM ကိုကျမတို့အောင်မြင်စွာနဲ့ဖွဲ့စည်းခဲ့တယ်အဲ့လိုဖွဲ့စည်းခဲ့တဲ့အတွက်စုပေါင်းတောင်းဆိုမှုတွေကိုပို့ပြီးတော့အားကောင်းစွာဖြင့်လုံသမားရဲ့အခွင့်အရေးတွေကိုပို့ပြီးတော့ကာကွယ်လာနိုင်ခဲ့တယ်ပေါ့နော်နောက်အနာဂတ်အတွက်မျှော်မှန်းချက်တွေကတော့ကျမတို့မြန်မာပြည်ကိုအမြန်ဆုံးဒီမိုကရေစီရရှိခြင်းနဲ့မြန်မာပြည်မှာရှိတဲ့အလုံသမားတိုင်းကိုလည်းလွတ်လပ်ပြီးတရားမျှတမှုရှိသောကောင်းမွန်သောလုပ်ငန်းဝင်များနဲ့ဖူလုံသောလုပ်ခလစာတွေရရှိပြီးတော့အလုပ်သမားတွေကိုယ်တိုင်ပါဝင်ပြီးရေးဆွဲထားတဲ့အလုပ်သမားတွေကိုကာကွယ်ပေးမဲ့အလုပ်သမားဥပဒေတွေပေါ်ပေါက်လာဖို့ကျမတို့အနေနဲ့အဓိကမျှော်မှန်းချက်ဖြစ်ပါတယ်လို့အားလုံးကိုကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်
And in 2019, we were able to form the national level federation by collectively organizing among the factory level unions. And as we become stronger union and stronger federation, we are more able to protect the rights of the workers. Our future vision is for Myanmar to be able to restore democracy and for every worker in Myanmar to be able to enjoy a free, fair, and good workplace and to get a living wage. Also, we vision that the labor laws that can protect the workers and that are written with the participation of the workers can be enacted. That is our vision. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Momo. And as GLJ-ILRF, we stand with the workers of Myanmar in your ongoing struggle, and you can call on us going forward. I'd like to pass to Allison to share the vision for
ကျေးဇူးတင်ပါတယ်ကျမလည်းချိန်ကိုငဲ့ကြခြင်းအဖြစ်
I just heard some of your presentations and I'm very impressed. I'm very impressed for your work. You guys are really strong and very brave. I think what I heard most is that your strikes in Taiwan is really far away in this sector at least. Initially, when we tried to form a union, I think topic today is more focused on the women leader. I myself is a woman leader, but I'm organizing more of a male migrant workers. They're all male migrant workers. So in the very beginning, when I was trying to, get inside their circle, it's not easy. But, in the past, they used to live on the boat. So after we are able to establish the union, we try to bring them into the community so that they can, start to interact with the community. We rented a house, which is the location of our union. When we rented that house, the majority of time they were out at sea. So I myself would live inside that house. When they're back, there will be a lot of people and they will bring fish. We will cook together, we'll eat together. And when they sleep at night, because I myself have a room in that house. there are not many rooms, so usually they would sleep in the living room or in the office or on the floor. But they will worry my safety, so they would actually sleep outside my room to protect me. I think I'm really touched. Together, we eat together, we sleep together, we live in the same space. We face, the challenges we had when establishing these unions, because back then when there would be some agencies or the companies that would want to find trouble in us. So we will face these issues and troubles together, and we solve them one by one. Now, before we established the union in that region, there are a lot of Filipinos and Indonesian migrant workers. Normally they would fight, had disputes. But after we were able to, establish this union, they started to become siblings. If they have any issues or troubles, they would try to solve it in the union. They will not do that in private with bottles or rocks or bats. And we become a family. I've also visited their family in Indonesia. Their family members, when they're sick, I would also visit them, because a lot of times the migrant workers cannot be able to go there themselves. They would ask me to visit them when they're in the hospital. So I would go there for them. In the region where we have this union, there's actually a goddess called Mazu. In that region, there are three Mazu statues. Now, the locals say that I'm the fourth one. I'm the fourth Mazu in that region. They say that Mazu is the person that actually takes care of the fishermen. And I'm the fourth one. I'm taking care of these migrant workers. So this is what they call me, because they're not satisfied with me. So that's why they call me that, because I take care of these migrant workers. But as for strikes, wow, that's really something that we want to do. I think, I do want them to have the right to go on the strikes. So if the boats cannot go out on the sea, they will know the importance of these migrant workers. But I think during this period, during this pandemic, there are fewer fishermen now. So I think it does impact the fishing activities in Taiwan. Now, when we are fighting for their rights, we also hope that during their working times, they can actually get paid in a fair manner. And also they don't have to spend that much time at sea. At least they would not have to be separated from their family for a long time, even though they can work in Taiwan for 12 years. But I've always think that 12 years is really inhumane. Being separated from your family, that's a really long time. So if that's the situation, if, for instance, if they're able to make enough money in 3 years or in 6 years, so they return to their home and they can actually, start a new business in their hometown, or start a new job in their hometown, then they don't have to spend that many time overseas, so that they can have more time to spend with their family. And also they can avoid this, I would say, the vicious cycle. During the time when they're working and supporting for their family, working overseas, when their children grows up and after they study, they're not able to find a job, but their children have to work overseas as migrant workers. So this is like a circle to them, to these families. I would want to stop that. And at least when they're working in Taiwan during that period, at least we can protect their health and their workplace safety, so that they will not be injured and they can have a better working conditions. And we also want to ensure that we can monitor the employment process. We want our unions to be able to intervene to monitor the employment process so that we can protect them. At least they are safe during their working period so that they can actually return to their home safely and reunite with their family. I think that's what we want to do in the future. Also, we will also want to promote an amendment on the union law. We will want to look at the ILO 87 and 97 because in Taiwan, what we focus, I think it's controlled majority by the government agency and also by the employer. So whenever meetings you want to have, the union members, all these need to be reported back to the government. So the government has control over the unions. We're hoping that with the spirits of the ILOs, we're able to actually make these laws into our domestic laws, and we don't have to, the unions doesn't have to be intervened by unions. We can actually be an autonomous unions. Thank you.
Thank you, Allison. And migration status, we know, is a structural vulnerability like gender that many supply chains are built on. So we appreciate your words and your work with migrant workers. So just to say to everyone that we are going to run for, we're going to run over about 10 minutes to allow final comments from Rosa Iris and the Deputy Secretary. So we appreciate everyone that can stay on. We wish we had a lot more time to hear and share, and we'll figure out how to do that more going forward. So I wanted to pass now to Rosa to hear from you. What is the vision of the union as you're building it, and what is the vision for your work?
Mira actualmente.
I apologize because our union is based on a transnational company, and in our country it's actually very new. Foreign investments are very new, and the problem that we're facing is that Indorama was founded in 2018 here, and until 2020 there hadn't been any audits, any inspections on violations or anything, because the government was trying to make everything possible to attract investments, and they just gave them freedom for 3 years. Do whatever you want. Nobody's going to be checking on you. Nobody's going to be auditing you. And this just led to this complete lawlessness at our company, because the management was able to work with impunity. And that's why I would like the government to review these regulations, and that would make our citizens a little bit less vulnerable in front of such foreign investors, because unfortunately not every foreign investor is good. Sometimes they are not acting in good faith. So if we have any kind of legislation that is protecting our workers from foreign investors, that would be good. And also, I would like to say that I have experienced discrimination as a woman, because I know that a man in the same position as I was getting twice as much. And when they were trying to fire me, you know what they would do? They would just turn my computer off, and I would just go to work every day, and I would just do nothing because they would turn my computer off. They would say, just sit here and do nothing. And the fact that I was able to go through all this humiliation and still come out on the other side and be fine, I think I became an example for men as well. And I think women leaders are very important, because and we're all mothers, and I see the union that I created as my child too, and all the people that we work with, they're like my children, and I hope that in the future it will benefit everyone, not just the workers, but also our communities and our society in general. And maybe people will become more freedom loving and would want to protect their own rights. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rosa. What a beautiful vision of the power of a union. Thank you for that. I will pass to Iris to share more about the vision of Festagro and Colsiba and the women that you're working with in Central America.
Bueno, gracias. Well, thank you. We would bet right now to two fundamental things and keep strength, giving strength to women. That's why I'm so happy that the U.S. government is thinking about strengthening the gender-based policies and the unions globally. And also that women, we have a challenge with a transnational, multinational company. We've been working to organize in the cantaloupe sector plantation. And with this multinational, it's in the process of grievances with the trade policies. We've been following on that. The government of the United States has accompanied us in this process, but we haven't reached an agreement or a union contract. So it's important for us, because as union women and union leaders, I believe that the only way to improve the labor conditions of female and male workers is through the union and through the collective bargaining, because it's not the same thing to be in a union that not having a union. The experiences are terrible. In the agricultural sector here, it's terrible. The conditions are terrible. So that's why my dream is to see in my country that there is no child labor, and see in my country that there is no so many migration to overseas. But the only way to stop the migration is with good conditions for female and male workers, because if we have good conditions, labor conditions, workers stay here. They wouldn't need to be immigrants in the United States. And I would keep that thought here, because because I think that's the way to improve the lives. And thank you so much to you and the forum. I am very happy to be part of this, and I hope we continue this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Iris. And we at GLJ-ILRF continue to stand with the STAS union in Honduras in the fight for decent work at FIFES. We have been and we will stand with the workers till the end. And your remarks remind me of Thomas Membrano with that union, who says that it's not just a job that keeps a person from having to migrate, but it's a job with decent work in a union. Those are the jobs that we must create, and unions are what help us create them and maintain them. So Julie, I just wanted to pass back to you for closing remarks on the importance of policies that promote freedom of association and the right to organize, even in the most difficult sectors. Everyone speaking here is speaking from a sector that has relied on forced labor, and yet, notwithstanding all of this, have organized and built unions and built new models. And how do you see that vision within broader efforts to end forced labor?
Well, absolutely, JJ. So I think, to just build on everybody's point, the other fact of the matter is that when you ask workers in the United States and around the world whether they want a union, overwhelmingly people say yes. So part of our job has to be to make it easier for workers who want to join a union to do so. It shouldn't be so terrifying with such big risks involved, where you really feel like you're fighting against multiple challenges and dangers, right? So that's a big part of the Biden-Harris administration's priority. And so on that note, I just wanted to pledge our solidarity with all the incredible work that all of you are doing. I think just to also say a little bit more about some of the points that were made, I think this idea, Allison said it, but everyone said it, right? Like we have to expand the table, expand, who leaders are, including within unions. That's also something, 100% that is right. And then what, I've seen in my work in talking about solidarity across workers who are not expected to work together, but also many of you mentioned too, when you do that, women leaders create space for everyone, right? So you really, you build a greater sense of community around, divisions that people think are supposed to keep workers apart when you have the right leaders in place. And so that's another important value that organizing brings. I'll just say about forced labor, JJ, to your point, I would say what we know is that forced labor, it's not an accident and it's not an isolated occurrence. It's really one end in a spectrum of abuse that workers have to endure. And the more we don't think about workers as powerful equals who deserve dignity and respect in our society, the more we allow conditions to persist where workers are exploited, where retaliated against, right? Work excruciating long hours under crushing poverty. And again, forced labor is just one spectrum of that. So for everyone who's outraged about forced labor, which is legitimate to be outraged about, we ought to be paying attention to the entire spectrum of abuse that allows forced labor to happen. And then the last thing I'll say is just around, policies, enforcement, all of these things matter, right? Strong labor laws. We at the Department of Labor, we have the ability to enforce also to stop goods from coming in if they're made in violation of laws. And so we're really trying to use, what I say often is we want to unleash our full power at the Department of Labor to protect working people here and around the world, and to pay attention to the many levers we have to do that. But these policies, enforcement powers, standards, they don't come about by accident either, right? They come about because of unions, because of worker voice, because of organizing. When workers have a voice in their workplace to say what the conditions will be and what's going to happen to them, it makes a really big difference. And so even when I mentioned, right, the union employers who are not having the same struggle with this so-called labor shortage, right? Workers are coming back when there are good jobs. It's the same point Edith makes. If there's good people stay and will do them. And so when I mentioned in the hospitality industry in California that adjusted during the pandemic to keep workers on and also to meet other needs like serving food to the elderly and the homebound, that happened because of employers, but it mostly happened because of the union, Unite Here, who had organized and represented the workers. And so it just makes a difference on every level. Workers want unions, and here President Biden, Vice President Harris, the entire Department of Labor is behind that effort, both here and around the world. I'll just say one last thing as a woman, because I think Rosa mentioned being a mother. I'm a mother of 2 daughters, and there's nothing like raising girls to see just how early people tell girls to stay in their place, right? To tell them there's only certain things that you can do. And so my girls are now grown, but when my older daughter was 5 years old, she wanted to be Spider-Man for Halloween. And everyone told her, you can't be Spider-Man. Spider-Man's a boy, Spider-Man's a man. And what I told her then was, you can be whatever you want to be. And what this panel demonstrates is that in real life, superheroes are women, and we should embrace that. We should say it loudly and proudly, and we should reflect that in all of the places where we create leadership tables. So thank you all for letting me be a part of this today.
Thank you all so much. This is such a powerful and moving discussion and reflects so much powerful work that is happening all around the world. I am now going to pass to my colleague at GLJ-ILRF, Valerie Alzaga, to close us out. And again, just a huge appreciation to everyone for their time today, for your sharing of your hard-earned wisdom with us, and for the opportunities that we can see in all this of how we might continue to work together.
Thank you so much. Wow, I had my skin, it was like, I cried almost. I mean, you guys had me like riveted, and I'm so proud to be your sister, you know? So thank you to each one of you, Allison, Edith, Julie, Mamu, and Rosa, for really today just waking us up to the invisible labor, right, that women bring to the labor movement, to reproductive labor. I mean, we take care of our families, our communities, we reproduce this system, its economic base, but also its social ties. And that's why we are good organizers and fighters. So I'm so very glad to be here with you, so moved. Thank you so much for your intervention today. And it's true, I mean, I think everything has been said. Before people leave though, this takes a huge amount of resources, right? To fight, to have organized people and organized money. So we do encourage you, please, before you leave, I know we're late, to please contribute and support us. But before we leave, I just wanted to say a couple of things, right? We as fighters for justice, as women that have risked so much, especially some of you that are organizing in some of the most repressive environments. You know, we understand today after COVID, and because climate change is coming, how important it's going to be for us to be organized and networked and allies and in solidarity with each other. We know that value chains and multinational corporations have an unprecedented power right now to extract, you know, labor and profit from each single one of us. And so it is our time, right, to match that. It is our time to continue to organize and to understand how these business models are going to be changing, and are changing so very much as we speak, because of the, you know, crisis we have and because of what's coming. And so, you know, it is upon us to understand both how, you know, corporations and their business models work, how we can intervene to make them responsible and more accountable, right? And also how women with our, you know, division of labor, the hard that it is, because we do some of the harshest works and the most important jobs, how is it that that inequality is continuously used by you know, capital and corporations? And what is it that we need to do as a labor movement to make sure that, you know, women's rights and labor rights are joined and are not just an afterthought, but really central to what we need to do. Migrant rights, women's rights, everybody that is excluded. If we don't do that, if we don't have racial and gender justice in economic justice, then it will always be lacking. It will always be unjust. So we're in this fight together. I'm very glad that we're here. And our commitment as Global Labor Justice and the International Labor Rights Forum is that we will find out, continue to research, continue to understand these dynamics, invest in organizing, invest in your leadership and many more women's leadership and men, to really fight the fight, and to understand how to intervene, how to make, you know, these corporations and trade more just, more fair. Yeah, and it will take a fight, and it will take allies as powerful as the Department of Labor, and it will take allies in the communities that are not necessarily in labor but benefit from it every day, our communities, our churches, our movements. And we are committed to building a broad church, a strong bargaining process, yeah, for the common good. And I just wanted to just kind of leave us with those thoughts that, you know, we need to be the democracy we want, and all the labor fights that we're contributing to and strengthening as a network of women and powerful movements, and more powerful movements that we need to be, is, it's our commitment. So I just want to thank you again for being here. We will be in touch, of course we will, and we will continue to invest in our training, in our development, in our capacity, in our infrastructure. And for that, we ask you to donate. Yeah, donate, because this work is not cheap. This work really requires us to put a lot of organized money together so we can bring each other into focus and continue to build the strength in the workplaces we need. So, again, this is a fundraiser, so please do your bit. And having said that, I want to recognize some of the work that made this possible. I wanna share 3 sisters' names that made this event possible before I leave, and that is obviously Caitlin Hoover, who was our, let's say, architect and did an amazing job. Nasi Damsio, our communications director, and Patricia de Mantang, who are also, without them, this event could not be possible. To their labor as women and as our sisters, thank you very much. I close us today. Thank you. We went overtime, just like a good Mexican would. That's me from Mexico. Just kidding. I'm very punctual usually, but sometimes we have to have this space for affection, right? And to shout out, as Roger would say, our director of finance, we have to recognize and do shout outs and elevate each other's work. So to you, my brave sisters, we'll be here and we will continue building this movement. Thank you for coming.
Gracias por la traducción. Muy bien. Gracias, gracias, gracias.
Que te levantas todos los días a buscar trabajo para proveer para tu familia. Tu cubrebocas, tu mascarilla nunca debe de faltar. Aunque sea incómoda, es parte de la nueva realidad. No importa lo que diga el presidente, corporaciones y aquellos muy valientes. Y si es cierto que no es cierto, mientras tanto, mucha gente se nos muere. póntela, póntela, ponte bien la máscara, no te vayas a contagiar. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara por tu salud y seguridad. Presidente, corporaciones y aquellos muy valientes, que si es cierto, que no es cierto, mientras tanto mucha gente se nos muere. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara, no te vayas a contagiar. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara por tu salud y seguridad. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara cuando salgas a trabajar. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara, a tu familia hay que cuidar. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara, trabajadora esencial. Póntela, 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 ponte bien la máscara por tus amigos y comunidad.